Welcome back to Joe Stunner Boxing. Let's talk about Julio Cesar Chavez Sr. One of the greatest fighters of all time. Magnificent fight. He turned pro in 81, I think, finished in 2005, so nearly a quarter of a century of fighting. Finished his career with 107 wins, 85 by KO, 6 defeats, stopped 4 times, and 2 draws, and is widely regarded as the greatest Mexican fighter of all time, in my opinion, deservedly so. Now, the reason I'm raising Chavez is because I keep hearing people saying Canelo is the greatest Mexican fighter of all time. I don't like judging people historically while their careers are still progressing. It is perfectly feasible that Canelo can go on and achieve more than he has achieved. However, I'm going to explain to you why I think Chavez is the best Mexican fighter of all time and what Canelo will have to do, by proxy, what Canelo will have to do in order to reach those heights. Okay, so Chavez was a 3-weight world champ, super feather to light welterweight or super lightweight if you prefer. He held various titles. He was a champion for a huge chunk of his career. He held WBA, WBC lightweight titles. He was Ring Magazine champ at a couple of weights. He had a grand total of 31 world title wins. 27, I think, were defenses. He had 21 by knockout. He won 21 of those by knockout. He was Fighter of the Year, named Fighter of the Year by the Ring and the Boxing Writers Association of America on 2 occasions. Just a great fighter. How loved was he in Mexico? Well, when he fought Greg Haugen in one of his title defences up at 140, 136,000 people turned up to see him. And that was the Estadio Azteca, the Aztec Stadium. That was in 1993. Floored Haugen early on. Then knocked him out in the 5th round. Haugen had never been stopped before. This is a magnificent fighter by any standards. And I have unbelievably, there's ignorance, there's naivety, and then there's outright what you might call willful ignorance or arrogant ignorance. I've heard people say that Chavez was overrated. You know, if you look at his record, it's padded with non-entities and all this crap. Look, yes, during that huge chunk of his career when he was a champion, Chavez would fight non-title fights. That was his way of sharpening his tools, keeping himself on the straight and narrow, not getting complacent, not getting slack. But there was another reason why he fought a lot of those. As well as the 31 wins for titles, he fought non-title fights predominantly in Mexico. Why? Because he wanted the Mexican people to see him fight. He knew that if he was going to make the big money, he had to fight in the US. He was under the auspices of Don King, so one wonders how much of his money he actually walked away with. Don King for you. Displays, what was it my friend Pat Brown said? He displays all the characteristics of a psychopath, does Mr. King. That's a nice way of saying he's probably a psychopath. But anyway, enough of that. And Chavez would fight non-title fights in Mexico in order for the Mexican people to watch him fight because he was such an idol. Hence the reason when he did fight on a major card in at the Azteca, 136 people came out to see him. So he wasn't just a brilliant fighter. He was deeply loved by his audience, and he was loved because he appeared to practice what he preached. It was never, you hear a lot, Viva Mexico, Okay, well, when do they get a chance to see you fight? Why aren't you fighting? Why aren't you, sharing the banquet table with the people that you supposedly love so much? Canelo doesn't do that. Now, there are other things that make me think Chavez is greater than Canelo, certainly at the moment. Again, Canelo hasn't finished his career, and he may achieve more. But Chavez never failed a drugs test. But, of course, you never know whether someone is on something. We know that drugs are rife and have been for a while now in boxing and sports in general. But Chavez never failed a drugs test. Canelo has. The downside for Chavez would be that he had a very controversial draw with Pernell Whitaker for Whitaker's, I want to say it was the WBC welterweight title. I'm not sure if it was WBC, but certainly for one of the welterweight titles. Or did Whitaker have more than one of those titles? I'm not exactly sure. Will come to me in a moment. And yeah, that was a controversial draw. But Chavez, even allowing for that, Chavez wasn't beaten until he bumped into Frankie Randall, who floored him for the first time in his entire career. That was his 91st fight. Talk about Mayweather being 50-0. And the 50th, of course, was against a bloke who never had a professional boxing match before. You want to talk about cherry picking? The 91st fight was when Chavez lost a decision. He won the rematch, although in my opinion, Randall should have had that decision. It was a technical decision. I thought Randall won that fight too. Randall had a style that was always going to give Chavez trouble. They did fight a third time right at the end of their careers when they were both way past it, and Chavez won another decision. But Randall had a style that would give Chavez problems, and Chavez just had so many miles on the clock, you know what I mean? Probably what's Chavez's finest moment out of many, many great moments, probably the Meldrick Taylor fight, which was brilliant. A brilliant fight. Taylor extremely fast, throwing a huge amount of punches, many of which were taken on Chavez's forearms, gloves, but gradually Chavez was landing the hurtful, harder punches, especially to the body and the head. I mean, Taylor had his eye smashed up and everything. By the end, if you looked at Chavez had a few abrasions, but Taylor was the one that really looked like he'd been battered. And, of course, there was the controversy at the end where Richard Steele, the referee, stopped it with 2 seconds to go. A lot of people have said Chavez got out of jail because he was losing the fight and it got stopped with 2 seconds. And, of course, that defined Taylor's career, certainly, because even though they had a rematch where Chavez dealt with Taylor much, much easier, stopped him in 6, 7, 8 rounds, something like that, middle rounds anyway. But Taylor was never the same. He did go on and win a welterweight title. The Chavez fight, the first one, was for the IBF light welterweight title, super lightweight title if you prefer, but it defined Taylor's career, and I don't think it completely defined Chavez's career, but at the same time it was probably his best win and probably his most spectacular win. He was a hellacious body punch. I mean, horrendous. He'd rag you to the body, and you'd, oh Christ, people must have been pissing blood for God knows how long. Another one of his more famous fights, which to me was, I mean, one of the guys, the opponent, which was Hector Camacho from Puerto Rico, he was past his best, okay? And he basically clutched and held Chavez for God knows how long, for the whole fight, really. And Chavez won an easy decision. Camacho was 41 wins and 1 defeat at the time. I mean, he had a good record and he'd beaten a lot of good men, and he was a very good fighter. But ever since he got badly stung by Edwin Rosario, in a title win, he became a very defensive fighter. That was down at lightweight. Rosario himself, a very, very good Puerto Rican fighter. So for some reason, Camacho became, even though he was very, very flashy, became much more reticent about going forward. And against Chavez, he just grabbed and held. Then you had the Haugen fight, 136,000 people turning up. And like most people, Chavez went on for too long. I mean, 5 of his he had 6 defeats and he 4 by stoppage. I think 3 of them were probably, maybe 4 of them were in his last dozen fights, maybe. Like most people, he went on for too long. He fought Oscar De La Hoya for the WBC welterweight title. In fact, he lost twice to De La Hoya. He lost his WBC super lightweight title on a 4th round TKO. He actually went into that fight with a very bad cut, which soon opened. And De La Hoya stopped him in 4. Then they had a rematch, and Chavez was pulled out by his corner in 8. A lot of people say he quit. If you look at that fight, yeah, it's possibly wanted out. Yeah. So as with most people, most of these great warriors, there are there are you can pick apart anyone's resume, especially when it's that long, for almost a quarter of a century of fighting. You can certainly do it with someone like Duran, and I mean I love Duran. Can you imagine Duran fighting Chavez, both at their peak? Fucking hell, what a fight that would be! Incredible. But that's Chavez in a nutshell. I mean, there's so much more to talk about. But now Canelo, let me make this clear. This is not an anti-Canelo video. It's a pro-Chavez video. Because I'm saying that anyone who says that Chavez is overrated or his record isn't what it seems, don't believe it. It's a load of bullshit. It's a load of people trying to be clever, trying to cast shade, trying to troll. Just ignore this. When I say ignore it, I'm making a fucking video about it. But you know what I mean? Don't take it seriously is what I'm saying, because it's bullshit, all right? Julio Cesar Chavez was a truly great fighter. And you can argue that Canelo is a truly great fighter. And maybe, like I said before, he'll go on to achieve other great things. But is Canelo the best Mexican fighter right now? I mean, with someone like Naoya Inoue, I think probably he is the greatest Japanese fighter of all time, regardless of fighting Harada, who was another great fighter. But even though his career is continuing and he's only 31, I think he's already achieved enough to say he's the best ever. Canelo has not done that to say he's the best Mexican fighter ever. Good fighter, very, very good, very talented, hugely talented and very difficult to beat, no doubt. And also, let's not forget that Canelo in recent years has pretty much ducked David Benavidez and David Morrell. They both had to move up to light heavyweight. Chavez never ducked anyone. The most you can say is perhaps he avoided a rematch with Pernell Whitaker, but that probably had more to do with Don King than Chavez himself. But yeah, I just thought I'd say that about Julio Cesar Chavez, one of my favourite fighters, the greatest Mexican ever, in my opinion. Leave your comments below. Do you agree with me, or maybe you do think Canelo's better than Chavez? If you do, give me some reasons. Don't just say it. Give me some reasons why you think so, and I'll read your comments. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you as always for your support. Please subscribe to the channel if you're new, because it helps us out a great deal, and we want to build the channel up. And hit the like button if you like the video, and if you didn't like the video, hit the like button anyway, because it's good for your karma. You know what I mean? Anyway, I'll get you later. Cheers. Bye for now.